Sridham Mayapur, the place of Srila Prabhupada said is the center of the universe. Shivamani Thakur. Paramananda He Madhava Ananda Ruchi Makaranda Sevakayanda Panakori Anande Moro Hari Hari Harinka Name Vandela Marigori Chakadona Se Chakado Lanka Paraye Manamona Hudiranjare Manamona Krishna Muni Jivaja Krishna Muni Jao Jiva Motu Nare Radha Motu Nare Radha Good morning, dear devotees. Sraddha Mayapur. Daily Bhagavatam class. Donna Kelly's here today. Hare Krishna, nice to see you. And Lynn, once again from a very far distant place of eastern Washington. Mother Pati Prabhu, Subhasham, Hare Krishna, nice to see you. So, yesterday we began the 29th chapter of the third canto. And today I intend to speak on a number of verses because our format's going to change a little bit. We'll speak about that at the end of our class today. But today I'd like to summarize a number of verses and mostly speak on text number 7. This is Lord Puberty speaking to his mother, Devaviti. So we're going to read from text 3 to 7 today. Chapter 29. Virago yena purusho bhagavan sarvato bhavet achakshva jivalokasya vividha mama samsriti. Devahuti continued, my dear Lord, please also describe in detail, both for me and for people in general, the continual process of birth and death. For by hearing of such calamities, we may become detached from the activities of this material world. Devahuti goes on. Kala sheshvara rupasya parishamja parashyate sarupam bhata kurvanti yadyadetu kushalam janaha. Please also describe eternal time, which is a representation of your form, and by whose influence people in general engage in the performance of pious activities. Lokasya mitya abhimatera chukshusas chiram prasutasya tamasya nasraye shrantasya karmas anuviddaye diya tvam avirasi hila yoga bhaskara. Text 5, my dear Lord, you are just like the sun, for you illuminate the darkness of ignorance, darkness of the conditional life of the living entities. Because their eyes of knowledge are not open, they are sleeping eternally in that darkness without your shelter, and therefore they are falsely engaged by the actions and reactions of their material activities, and they appear to be very fatigued. Text 6. Maitre uvacha iti matur vachas lakshnam pratananja mahamuni abhabhashe kuru shrestha pritistham karunarditaha. Sri Maitreya said, O best among the Kurus, the great sage Kapila, moved by great compassion and pleased by the words of his glorious mother, spoke as follows. So we find that in any discussion, any great discussion, there has to be great questions. And great answers are predicated upon by great questions. In the Vedic literature, sometimes it's said that questions are more important than answers. A good question will make you think. And many times we see that wise persons, sometimes they answer a question with a question. Questions are very, very important. In the Bhagavad Gita, the first chapter is described as Bishad Yoga, or the yoga of lamentation. And Arjuna expresses, he opens up his heart before Krishna. And then in the second chapter, when Krishna first begins to speak, it said that Kutashtam Kashmalamidam. Krishna says that it said that Krishna, in response to that lamentation of Arjuna, Vishame Samupashtitam, that he, excuse me, I'm thinking of the verse before this, that Sanjaya, he describes that Krishna, seeing the lamentation, Vishidantam idam vakyam, seeing the Vishad of Arjuna, idam vakyam, then he began to speak Bhagavad Gita. So in the same way now we've heard these questions from Devahuti to Lord Kapila Deva. Devahuti is a very qualified person. What we want to see is a dynamic, just like in the 60s in America, there was a be-in. They had sometimes festivals, social festivals, they call it be-in. It's a happening. That was another phrase for them. So Srimad Bhagavatam is a real happening. But for Srimad Bhagavatam to really take place, it means Krishna makes his appearance. There has to be proper questions and proper answers. So now we're going to read Lord Kapiladi's first response to his mother. I'm going to, for our next week or two, because it looks like we're leaving from Mayapur in a couple of weeks, and we may not be live streaming after that for some time. We're going to change our format, and I'm going to start giving class only 3 days a week, on Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday at the same time. And we're going to add one feature to that if anybody's interested in taking part in the Zoom discussion. So we're going to add that feature. You can write to me, send me a private message on Facebook, and we'll add you, we'll send you the link for Zoom. And then devotees can make comments and things. But that'll be easier for me, so I can focus on my writing. And then what we're going to do is, we're not going to do necessarily every verse of this chapter, chapter 29, but certain verses we'll focus on. So text number 7 today. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bhakti Yogo Bahuvido Magarbhanu Bhavyate Swabhava Guna Margena Pumsambhavo Vidyate. Lord Kapila, the personality of Godhead, replied, O noble lady, there are multifarious paths of devotional service in terms of the different qualities of the executor. This now is beginning a very, very wonderful section of the Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport, pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness is one because in pure devotional service there's no demand from the devotee to be fulfilled by the Lord. But generally people take to devotional service with a purpose. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, people who are not purified take to devotional service with 4 purposes. A person who is distressed because of material conditions becomes a devotee of the Lord and approaches the Lord for mitigation of his distress. A person in need of money approaches the Lord to ask for some improvement in his monetary condition. Others who are not in distress or in need of monetary assistance but are seeking knowledge in order to understand the absolute truth also take to devotional service, and they inquire into the nature of the Supreme Lord. This is very nicely described in Bhagavad Gita 7:16. Actually, the path of devotional service is one without a second, but according to the devotee's condition, devotional service appears in multifarious varieties, as will be nicely explained in the following verses. I'm really excited. I love this section of the Bhagavatam. Gora Draganya Gana Gota Goloruharam Goranga Guda Tamagopyada Kopa Briksham Gopala Gada Gati Dhamyati Singha Gora Govinda Deshikavaram Shatatam Namami Vanchakopati Visham Viva Sindhu Vyayedacham Patitanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavebhyo Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Rama. So it's significant that in his beginning description of devotion of bhakti, he says bhakti yoga bahuvido. Bahuvido means there are many, many multifarious paths of bhakti. This is such a very, very important thing. This point alone we could speak on extensively. I'm not going to, but we'd like to at least touch on it. Prabhupada translates it, there are multifarious paths of devotional service. And those multifarious paths, svabhava guna margena, are according to the different guna, the svabhava guna, the different natures of different personalities. So this is the first point, the beauty of bhakti. The problem with religion in the world, you speak to so many people in America, they found something, I forget, something like 70% of the people in America don't like organized religion. But a large percentage of the people consider themselves to be spiritual, but they don't like organized religion. Why does organized religion have such a bad name? Why is it that so many people have become atheists? With all respect to the followers of the path of Christianity, I would suggest that Christianity has become very prominent, and perhaps I can see that some of the proponents, the followers of Christianity, have not always behaved in a very appropriate way, which is really following Christ. And they were very pushy, and to the point where the word preach has different meanings. The word preach means to share something with someone, but the word preach also has a negative meaning in English now. It means to speak down to someone. And so because of that so-called preaching, many people have become atheists. Because certain people want to promote their religion as the only religion. It's not only Christians who do that. It's also Hare Krishna devotees. Sometimes it's also Muslims who want to do jihad. It's also so many different persons. But intuitively, everyone understands that, as described in the Declaration of Independence in America, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, I think they include women, that all men and women are created equal. We all have an equal position, but how is that equality there? It's equal in terms of our connection, our possibility of our connection with God. But here, innately, the bhakti has this quality. It's bahuvido. It has many different multifarious branches. It has so many different flavors. The nature of someone who's an external person, and we'll be hearing about that in this chapter. Lord Kapilade is going to speak about people who are practicing bhakti, and some of them are doing it more or less as a religion, more or less in a mechanical kind of way. Some are doing it in the mode of goodness, some are doing it in the mode of passion, some are doing it in the mode of ignorance. And he describes different motivations in this chapter for bhakti. But innate within bhakti itself is the understanding that we're all individuals, and we're all going to have our own particular individual relationship with the Lord and our own particular individual flavor. Such a wonderful thing. For those people who see things in terms of black and white, bhakti is not in terms of black and white. Bhakti is not even just in terms of full color, but bhakti means unlimited varieties of color. And therefore, persons who practice bhakti, who are really practicing, as we'll hear in this chapter, maybe there's some people who seem like they're practicing, but they're not really practicing. The people who are really practicing, they understand this first principle, bahuvido margar, that on this marg, on this path of bhakti, there's multifarious different moods. And they respect that, and instead of looking to see, do you belong to my church? And if you don't belong to my church, then I hate you. Then I'm going to kill you. If you don't agree with my mood, then I don't want to be your friend. But someone who's actually an advanced transcendentalist, as Lord Kapilade immediately beginning to teach his mother, is someone who has this intuitive understanding that there's multifarious paths. And so then what we respect is not just the fact that they're doing bhakti, although we also appreciate that. Krishneti yasya giritonmanasagiyete bhakti chasti chetpanati dishya bhajantanisham. Rupa Goswami describes in his Upadeshamrita, his most important instructions, that anyone who chants the name of Krishna, or we might even say anyone who chants the name of God, we give respect to them. We give more respect to someone, Dikshashri Chet Pranati Vishya Vajantanisham, who's engaged in worshiping God, that they're a priest. They're dedicating their life to God. We should give respect for that. They may be a Christian priest, they may be an imam, they may be a Buddhist monk, but if someone is giving up material life for some desire for something spiritual and otherworldly, we should give all respect to them. But at the same time, then there's different degrees of persons, different types of persons. And ultimately, Nindari Shunya Vidamipsita Sangha Labdhya. We give the most respect to someone who's Dikshasi Chetpanati Vishya Bhajantanisham, Shushushaya Bhajana Vigyam, who's Bhajana Vigyam, who understands bhajan, who knows the science of bhajan. And that doesn't mean, as we'll hear in this chapter also, just a mechanical, informational basis of understanding, that I've passed a Bhakti Shastri degree and I know more than everybody else. I know so many shlokas. Jayananda Prabhu, who was one of the greatest saints in our movement, didn't know a lot of shlokas. But he's such a great saint because he's completely Krishna conscious and completely conscious of serving Srila Prabhupada. That's the standard. That's what bhajan vigyan means. Someone who's so expert in bhakti, in bhajan, that they know how to do bhajan constantly, and has the qualities of nindari shunya vida, whose heart is completely free from the propensity to criticize others. Ipsita sangha labdhya. This is, labdhya means what I need. This is the sangha, the association I need, that I want. And so, Lord Kapila Dev doesn't mess around. Srimad Bhagavatam doesn't mess around. He gives us a straight truth. Srila Prabhupada is giving us a straight truth in this chapter. It's not enough just to dress up like a Hare Krishna devotee. It's not enough just to go to Mangal Arti and wear tulsi beads and tilak. And it's not even enough just to chant 16 rounds and to be an official member. But what is the quality of the person's devotion? Otherwise, Krishna consciousness will become what Srila Prabhupada sometimes sarcastically referred to as churchianity. Not Christianity, but churchianity. We just build buildings. And we have a propensity for that also in our society. Prabhupada warned about that because he knew that propensity was there. And it doesn't mean that, as we were speaking last night, something with Ranjan Maharaj, that we can't just judge the society based upon the members of the society. That's a rather shallow type of behavior. You can't just say that, oh, because you're from America, it means you like the president there, just because you live in that country. There's so many different persons. Rather, someone who's mature will understand and see someone by their qualities. And so similarly, as my Guru Maharaj used to say, who's really a member of ISKCON? ISKCON, what is ISKCON, he would ask. ISKCON means the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So who's really a member? Someone who's Krishna conscious. And this is the purpose of this movement. We want to become conscious of Srila Prabhupada's desire. Srila Prabhupada did not come just to create an institution. That wasn't his purpose. Rather, that was, as we sometimes say, is the box which carries the gift that Srila Prabhupada came to give. And that box originally had a different color. It originally had a different label, and it was called the League of Devotees. The box looked a little bit different. It was all completely Indian persons, at least one that I know of, who got initiated by Srila Prabhupada. The box looked differently, but the contents of the box were the same. So the external box may look different in so many different times, but we want to focus on what's inside the box and not just be a shallow person who gets a gift and runs around, wow, it's such a nice box, I like the box. And somebody says, why don't you open it? No, I don't need to open it, man, I just like the box. The box is the most important thing. You say, this guy's nuts. What's inside the box? Unpack it. And so this is what Lord Kapila Dev is teaching us in this chapter, the Bhagavatam. Open up the box. Understand what's inside the box. So I wasn't planning on making all these points. Today I was thinking to speak something from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, from Jiva Goswami, and from some other places about these four types of persons who come to Bhakti, which is the foundation that Srila Prabhupada is speaking about for this chapter. And he cites this Gita verse 7:16. Chatur vida bhajante mam jana sukritanojana arto jignasya artarti jagyani cha bharatarshaba. That there's four types of persons, Chatur vida bhajante mam, who begin to do bhajan of Krishna. That those persons are Sukrita, persons who are very pious. So someone who's arta, who is a distressed person, who's suffering, and someone who's jignasa, someone who's inquisitive, and someone who's arti, who desires wealth. These persons, they begin to practice bhakti. Now, we yesterday cited a little something from a wonderful series of lectures of Bhaktivinoda Thakur called Bhakti Tattva Vivek. In our presentations, I like very much to try to present literature from our acharyas, their thoughts, and focus on that, both for my benefit to hear that, and also to give a message to devotees in the movement. My Gurus used to say that if you can't quote Shastra, don't tell them you're my disciple. We should quote Shastra as much as we can. This is our value, our real treasure in our society. So Bhaktivinoda explains this verse that we just read from the 7th chapter of the Gita. Today is going to be a little bit of a philosophical discussion. So I suggest everybody fasten your safety belts and you'll survive, I think. So Bhaktivinoda describes, Arta refers to someone who wants freedom from suffering. They've been suffering so bad, they're really, really miserable. And so then they want to come to God consciousness because they have the idea of freedom from that suffering. Jignasu refers to a person who's fond of inquiry. Artarti is someone who desires happiness. And Bhaktivinoda says that even if a person has any of those qualities, still he won't begin to worship the Lord. It's not enough. There's a lot of people who are suffering in the world today. I've seen a lot of poor people. Krishna in the Gita, in the Bhagavatam, he says, Yashyaham anugrinami harishita dhanamsuni. If I really favor someone, then I give my anugraha, my mercy, by taking everything away. But you read that and you say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. I've been to downtown Los Angeles. If you go to downtown Los Angeles, we used to take you to new bhaktas on Harinam. I don't know, do they still go? Maybe not during the pandemic, but before and after. It's a little bit of a difficult place. Parts of that place stink like urine, like anything. And there's people living on the street. There's so many drunks and different types of persons who are there. So it's not just because someone is poor that means they're going to become a devotee. There's many poor people there, but they're not all becoming devotees. Rather, they're just the opposite, honestly. A lot of them go very deep in the mode of ignorance. Some of them commit suicide or they die of drug overdose or things like this. So Bhaktivinoda says it's not enough that some of these four types of persons to get bhakti. Something else is required. They must have Sukriti. Jiva Goswami, Bhaktivinoda says, defines Sukriti in Bhakti Sandarbha as actions of great devotees which create impressions of bhakti. Actions of great devotees which cause impressions of bhakti. When someone hears Srila Prabhupada chanting, someone sees a great devotee. In Dharma, Bhaktivinoda says there was one great Mayavadi sannyasi who was extremely learned in Vedanta. And in Kashi, he was staying there and he became a Vaishnava. No one preached him, no one gave him a book. One day he saw some crazy Hare Krishna devotee who was rolling on the ground and crying and chanting, Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur. And it made such an impression on his heart that he inquired, who are these people? They had this funny tilak that was straight up, and he said, oh, those are the Hare Krishna people. They live in Mayapur. And so he came to Mayapur because of that, because of the action of a great devotee. This is what creates impressions of bhakti. Now, Rupa Goswami, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he also comments on this verse, 17th chapter, text 7th chapter, text 16 of the Gita, chapter Vida Bhajanti Mam. Rupa Goswami explains it very interestingly. Tatra Gitadi Suktanam Chaturnam Adhikarinam Madhye Yasmin Bhagavata Kripa Shat Tat Priyashyava Sakshina Tat Tat Bhava Shat Chuda Bhaktadikaravan Yateva Sonikadibhyas Chadruva Sacha Chatusam. He says, among the 4 different types of persons qualified for bhakti, which are mentioned in the Gita, when they receive the mercy of the Lord or his devotee and eradicate those tendencies, it's a very interesting thing. It says the 4 types of qualification which are mentioned in the Gita, those things are actually obstructions in pure bhakti. Very interesting point. He says, when they eradicate those qualifications, those tendencies, then they become qualified for pure bhakti. And he gives examples. Gajendra, Sonaka Rishi and the sages, Dhruva, and the 4 Kumaras. And Bhakti Vinod quotes this verse, and he explains that Gajendra was suffering when he was attacked by a crocodile. And so he was praying for the Lord, oh please, I'm really suffering, life really sucks, it's terrible, please help me. Well, when he prayed for the Lord for protection, the Lord appeared and protected him. Then by that contact with the Lord, his motivation for worshiping because of suffering disappeared. And then Gajendra got qualification for pure bhakti. Similarly, he says the sages headed by Sonaka Rishi, they were afraid of the onslaught of Kali Yuga. And so then they went to Sutta Goswami and they said, what should we do? This is really a bad time coming up. So then when they heard Srimad Bhagavatam from Sutta Goswami at Naimisharanya, then they attained pure bhakti and they gave up their fear. Similarly, Dhruva Maharaj, who wanted a kingdom greater than his grandfather's, Lord Brahma, greater than his great-grandfather, he had darshan of the Lord. And when he had darshan of the Lord, he said, forget this. What is this? Kutartosmi, that this is just like some broken piece of glass that I'm asking for. But I'm getting a great jewel. And then thereby he became qualified for pure bhakti. The 4 Kumaras were impersonal Gyanis in the beginning. He said, but when the Lord and his devotees gave mercy to the 4 Kumaras, then they said, forget this Brahma Gyan. We don't want this. And they became qualified for pure bhakti. Bhaktivinoda explains, this means that as long as the contamination of these 4 types remains in the heart, qualification for pure bhakti cannot arise. Wow. So in this chapter of the Bhagavatam, Lord Kapila is going to be speaking about what is pure bhakti, what is impure bhakti. As Bhaktivinoda explains in the beginning of his articles, which were later compiled in a book called Bhakti Tattva Vivek, he said it's important that we understand, if we want pure water, if someone says, please give me pure water, you also need to know what is impure water. Because we don't know what is pure water, you may just go to a ditch, and believe me, the ditches in India are not the same as the gutters in America. You go to some ditch in India and you fill up a cup and here's some water, Maharaj. You give them that. I mean, it's a very nasty, horrible thing. You may try to drink from that. So we have to know what is pure and what is impure. If we don't understand what is impure, then Bhaktivinoda says we may become discouraged. If we don't understand what is impure bhakti, we may become discouraged and think, oh, I've been practicing this for so many years, it doesn't work, I'm going to give this thing up, I'll do something else. And this happens, sometimes we see. So we need to understand what is pure bhakti, what is impure bhakti, what is a shadow of bhakti, what is bhakti mixed with jnana, what is bhakti mixed with karma, what is bhakti in the modes of material nature. Otherwise, we may become discouraged. But if we understand what is impure bhakti, we can see, oh, I have one of these four motivations that people begin to practice bhakti with. But I'm not getting a taste for bhakti because I'm stuck on wanting knowledge, or I'm stuck on wanting freedom from suffering, or I'm stuck on wanting happiness, or I'm stuck on wanting material wealth. And because of that material desire that I have, therefore I'm not experiencing pure bhakti. Sometimes I've noted that devotees become disturbed when we speak about this thing. As we often tell the story, I won't tell the story now, but one lady once told Samba, who asked her at a party, have you ever thought about death? She said, you can't talk like that here. You'll spoil the whole party. So similarly, sometimes devotees don't like it if you speak about what is pure bhakti, what is impure bhakti, what is sudanam, what is asudanam. In Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Jagadananda Pandit, in Prema Vivarta, he says that nam akshara bahiro beti nam kabuni, that just the syllables of the name are not actually the name. Someone can read the name in a dictionary, but they're not getting the real name. They're just getting the syllables. But that real name comes in association with devotees, and therefore Radhanath Das Goswami says, Nama Shesha Manamati Sachiputra Makarasritam. The first thing he offers his appreciation to for his Gurudev is, my Gurudev gave me the topmost name. He gave me the real name. Real name we say because there's such a difference between that topmost name and in this common name, which what Jiva Goswami calls Kevalanam in his commentary in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam. He says there's two types of chanting. There's Sneha Samyuktanam, or chanting with affection. And the second type is Kevalanam. It's the name of the dictionary. And that also is good. You'll get Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. If you practice Bhakti and you're not a pure devotee, you'll also get Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. You'll be able to increase your congregation. You'll be able to get lots of money, like Dhruva Maharaj got a whole universe. You'll be able to get so many things, all the 4 different things that people come to the Lord for and begin to practice bhajan. You'll be able to get any of those 4 things. But you won't be able to get Panchama Purushartha, the 5th and highest goal, which is Krishna prema. And so Bhakti Vinod says, it's not until we give up these different motivations for bhakti that we'll begin to practice pure bhakti. So Bhakti Vinod, he says that Sukriti must be there, but he also says that Sukriti is also not enough. We see that sometimes people have Sukriti. They may be chanting, they may be doing so many things, but still they leave. Something else is required. Sraddha, or faith. Shraddha sabde visvas kahe sudhava nistroy krishna bhakti kwaye sarva karma krita hoy. Chaitanya Charitamrita describes that Sraddha means that firm faith that all I have to do is practice bhakti, and it's sarva karma krita hoy. Everything else is taken care of. The Chandogya Upanishad defines faith. Yadavai shadadati attamamate, na shadadan manate, shadadad eva manate, shadadeva vigyan it tavyeti, shadam bhagavo vigyasa iti. Spoken by Sanat Kumar in the 7th section of Chandogya Upanishad. He said that when a person develops Shraddha, faith, he defines it as respect for that which is to be known. Interesting definition. Then he makes the effort to comprehend that object. So Shraddha means that you have some respect for what is to be known, and then you make an effort to comprehend it. Only those who have that faith can know that object. Others without it can't have it. Therefore, first there must be Shraddha. It's essential, therefore, to understand what is the true nature of Shraddha. And he's speaking with Narad Muni, who tells the Lord, quoting this, my dear Lord, I earnestly desire to learn fully about this Shraddha. So, in our Sampradaya, Bhakti Vinod says that Shraddha means this, Shraddha tanopaya varjam bhakti mukhi chitta vritti vishesha. That it's this special quality, this vishesh, that Shraddha is a propensity in a man which strives for bhakti and rejects the attainment of bhakti by karma Jnana, yoga, or anything else. That bhakti, bhakti sanjayate bhakti, the bhakti comes from bhakti. And we don't try to develop bhakti through varnashram dharma. We don't try to develop bhakti through piety, through being a nice person. So this Sraddha is required. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he also says that Shraddha is also not enough. Something else has to be there also. And Jiva Goswami speaks about this in Bhakti Sandarbha. He says, Jatayam Shradayam Siddha Tad Anubriti Chestaiva Syat Karma Parityago Vidiyate. That when the Shraddha rises in a person, then he gives up karma. Karma Parityago Vidiyate, and that he defines as Saranagati, or surrender. That Saranagati has to be there. Krishna says, Sarva Dharma Parityaga Mamekam Sharanam Bhajaham Tvam Sarva Papibhyo Mokshayashyami Masucha. That you have to give up. Bhaktivinoda says all dharmas refers to giving up attachment to karma in the form of varnashram, worship of the devatas and others. He says these are all obstacles to surrender. So we should have faith in worship or surrender, sarana. So then Bhaktivinoda says, therefore we see faith is not only a cause of bhakti, but faith is also a cause of karma and jnana. If someone has faith in karma or jnana, then they can perform karma or jnana. If they don't have faith, they can't perform it. So the conclusion, he says, is that faith is not enough. Sukriti is not enough. Faith is not enough. And even Saranagati, even surrender is not enough to develop bhakti. But ruchi must be there. Taste is necessary. And as we discussed yesterday, Bhaktivinoda says that this ruchi has to also be there in karma and jnana. And that ruchi is there with a little bit of bhakti. A little bit of bhakti is there. Someone's practicing some karma, and maybe they're reading verses which have the names of Krishna. Or they're giving charity, and they also give charity to the Vaishnavas, and you get some pleasure from that. Because there's a little bit of bhakti there. So Bhaktivinoda says that faith endowed with ruchi, when it's fixed in the jiva's heart, that becomes the seed of the bhakti creeper. So what is that faith in? Ado shraddha tata sadhu. Faith in sadhu. When we have faith in sadhu, we come in touch with that sadhu. And shushu shoshadadana shavasa deva tatavati, we surrender to that sadhu, we're in the service of that sadhu. Then we get some ruchi, some taste from that, kata ruchi. And that's the beginning of bhakti. So many different topics on this subject. It's a very, very technical subject. I don't want to kill everybody with this, but we just want to give the impression of at least the understanding to devotees that this is something deep. If you don't understand anything else from our discussion today, you just walk away and say, wow, there's a whole lot to bhakti. Then I'm very, very happy. Because if we think that bhakti is something very simplistic, like sometimes devotees do, or people do, that all you do is you just chant and that's it, and then you're going to become discouraged perhaps at a certain time. Why am I not getting a proper result? So we should understand, we need to go deep in bhakti. We need to understand what is Sudha Bhakti, what is Chaya Bhakti, what is a shadow of Bhakti, what is Bhakti Abhas, a reflection of Bhakti. Different types of Bhakti are there. We're going to hear about this in this section of Srimad Bhagavatam. So I want to stop there. We're again a little later than I wanted to go. And try to speak on more topics than probably should. Hare Krishna Mahendrapur, it's nice to see you. I always feel humble. Thank you for being your father. Radhika Radha is there from the holy land of Vrindavan. And Mitra Vinda making so many nice comments. Thank you, Mitra Vinda. Natalia. Mitra Vinda makes many nice comments. Thank you. Madhu Patipa was given a question. Is inquiring about the absolute truth also a contamination? No. Thank you very much. Bhakti is such a wonderful thing, as we often quote Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Krishna Samhita. Subtle discrimination is extremely important for Vaishnavas. So from a gross consideration, it may appear from what we spoke today, that inquiry about the Absolute Truth is also a contamination. But no, what's being spoken of is not just inquiry, but what's being spoken about is people who want to understand the Absolute Truth for some sense gratification, of some mental gymnastics, for some information-based gyan. So then he asks, is it a contamination because it's about me that I want to know the Absolute Truth? Yes, it's a manifestation of our own pride in some ways, that we want to know some gyan. But another type of question arises, as given by Sanatana Goswami, who says, Ke-ami? Who am I? There's no pride there. There's no desire for information content. There's just the basic desire to understand who I am and why am I here. And Lynn is also asking this question, is surrender the same as taking shelter? Well, we may take shelter. Both of them have some similarities. Taking shelter is an aspect of surrender, but it's one aspect. And surrender, as we would hear, Saranagati has different aspects of it. It's described in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Sadvida Saranagati, that there's 6 different aspects of surrender. Anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam, rakshishyatiti visvaso, gruptitve varanam tata, atmanikshepa, karpanya sadvida saranagati. The 6 divisions are that we accept whatever is favorable for devotion. Anukulyasya sankalpa, I accept that thing. Pratikulyasya varjanam, whatever is detrimental to my bhakti, I reject. And then is the conviction, rakshishyatiti visvasa. Visvasa is firm conviction, or firm faith that Krishna will protect me. Even I have to leave the country, even I have no idea what's going to happen in the pandemic, where my future is. Rakshishyatiti visvasa, we should have firm faith that Krishna, he will protect. Goptidve, that Krishna, he's my guardian and master. And then there's atmanikshepa, full surrender, and karpanya, or humility. These are 6 different divisions of surrender. So when we speak about surrender, just taking shelter is one small slice of that pie. It's not exactly the same. When we're speaking of surrender, it's a greater thing. Because someone may take shelter of someone, but the depth of that shelter may not be full. And when it's full, fully developed shelter, we might call that Saranagati. Madhupati says, I hear that Krishna is very reluctant to give bhakti because then he'll be bound by it. I remember reading one purport in this regard by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in the 10th canto, where he said that Krishna tends to hide his devotees. Why does he hide his devotees? Because if you surrender to a devotee, if you take shelter of a devotee, then Krishna becomes bound up by you, by doing that. And so Krishna tends to hide those devotees from people who are not qualified. But what is our qualification? When we begin to practice what our Guru Maharaj used to call Atmakrandana, or the crying of the soul. And we have this existential crisis in our heart. We're crying, who am I? Why am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of everything? I want to know. I need shelter. I need some answers. Then Krishna manifests in the form of sadhu. So I'd like to stop there from anything online unless someone writes something else. Any other comments or questions from devotees, reflections or anything? Sachitananda, do you have anything? Yeah. You want to come here and talk to the mic? It's nicer for devotees online.
You mentioned that Bhakti comes from Bhakti, is that what you say?
Yes.
Doesn't need any other.
There's a verse in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam that describes that Bhakti Sanjayate Bhakti, that Bhakti comes from Bhakti. Bhakti doesn't come from Varnashram. Bhakti doesn't come from karma, or gyan, or pious activities, or vairagya. Bhakti comes from Bhakti.
So there is, sometimes we hear some references when Sukadeva Goswami is mentioning to Parikshit Maharaj, when he's describing the 10th canto about how wonderful these boys are playing with Krishna, they must have performed many pious activities, Krita Punya Punya. And sometimes the gopis, the queens and Dwarka, when they're looking at Krishna, and say, wow, those gopis of Vrindavan, they must have performed many pious activities. And of course, we also heard a famous verse, Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavitamati Yadi Kutan, what is that? Kriyatan Yadi Kutwa Pilaviyate, Nanjan Makoti, yeah. That if you see something, just get it, go purchase it. So I'm trying to understand that it looks like there are gradations or decorations in devotional service to actually come to Bhakti. It appears to me, so please explain. It appears because, yes, Bhakti comes from Bhakti, but sometimes we don't have any Sukriti. We don't have any pious activities, and then look, wait a minute, now you're having Bhakti. So, you know what I'm leading to? So then, even I think Srila Rupa Goswami, sometimes in the Nectar Devotion mentions that, it is to be understood if someone is doing some devotional activities, not that in his previous lives he did something. But we also hear that sometimes Prabhupada told his disciples, I clear your fortune. You don't have any, so please.
So, such a nice comment, thank you. So there's different types of Sukriti, first of all. When the cowherd boys are spoken about the Bhagavatam, Sukriti Punya Punya, that they must have done so much Sukriti, so much pious activities in previous lives, or the queens of Dwarka are speaking about the gopis in a similar way. We shouldn't think that this means some mundane Sukriti. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says there's three types of Sukritis: Jnana-mukhi Sukriti, Karma-mukhi Sukriti, and Bhakti-mukhi Sukriti. Or Sukriti which is based upon knowledge and which leads to knowledge. Sukriti, piety, which is based on pious activities and which gives more pious activities. And Sukriti, or piety, which is based on bhakti, which gives more bhakti. And what does that mean? It means that someone has come in touch with Navavidhi Bhakti, the different processes of devotional service, but they may not be doing it purely, as we described yesterday. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he says, Indriya Vyapara. It's the senses engaged in the sense objects. You're not actually realizing Bhakti, Tasha Krishna Nama Vinava Indriya. But when you engage in service to the devotee, and therefore this verse is important in Brihanaradiya Purana, Bhakti Stu Bhagavad Bhakta, Sangena Parijayate, Satsange Kapite Pumbi Sukrita Visanchita. The first part of the verse is often quoted. Many times the second part is not quoted. The first part describes that Bhakti comes by association with the devotees. But then how do we get association with the devotees? Satsange Kapite by Sukriti. But that Sukriti is by Bhakti Unmukhi Sukriti. When we practice Bhakti, when we chant Hare Krishna, we're not doing it in a proper way, but still there's great piety from that. And from that piety, one may get association with the devotee. So does that make things a little more clear? It's a really nice point. Again, I want to make the comment that sometimes devotees, even in our society, become disturbed by these kind of discussions. But we just keep it simple. Why are you saying all these complicated things? Well, we're saying all these complicated things because Srila Prabhupada is saying these complicated things in his purports. And although Srila Prabhupada said that Krishna consciousness is simple for the simple, we've learned over the years that sometimes we're not so simple. And if we don't understand the science of Bhakti, if we don't read Srila Prabhupada's books and understand Prabhupada's books, if we don't read the person Prabhupada said is my favorite author, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, if we don't read the writings of Bhaktivinoda, he gave us this for a purpose. If we don't read Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which Prabhupada said is a very important book for all the devotees. And although Prabhupada gave Nectar Devotion, he also said later, I'd like to translate Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He said that was separate from Nectar Devotion, because there's so much to be gotten from it. If we don't hear from these books, then we may become discouraged. We may think that all Bhakti doesn't work. So we should understand these principles. I'm not playing that. Do you have anything? She has something. Please.
I I would like to ask about these 4 types of persons who are able to approach the God. You said you read something from Bhakti that unless they overcome these practices, there's no way to start Bhakti from them.
Yes.
And interesting. Pure
Pure
Bhakti,
Bhakti.
yeah. And also I heard once.
But pure bhakti means real bhakti. When you ask for water, you don't. Can I have a glass of dirty water from the ditch? Water means pure water. Bhakti means pure bhakti. Bhakti makes this point.
Yeah, and so you came to the point finally, and also Prabhu spoke about this that actually it's not possible unless you meet pure devotee and surrender. So it's really interesting how you said that it's not enough to give up karma, it's not enough even Saranagati, it's not enough faith, but pure bhakti begins when we meet pure devotee and serve to him. And also, as you commented, we get this Sukriti by Bhakti, to associate this kind of devotees. Thank you so much.
When, as Mahendra was pointing out nicely, when we associate with a pure devotee who's free from material desires, and this is why I remember Satyatanura related to this, I won't say names of places, but when I first came to Guru Maharaj, I left the temple where I was living, and I went to live in India, and I was hearing from Guru Maharaj, and all of a sudden I had a completely different perspective on Bhakti. And I came back to that temple where I used to live, and some of the devotees, my old friends, wanted to speak with me, and they said, so what is your realization? And I started telling them, we have to associate with pure devotees, it's so important. And I remember one of the very senior devotees there at the time, he looked a little kind of confused, and maybe even a little hurt. And he said, well, I thought we were all pure devotees. And that was a bit of a revelation for me. Sometimes we think that all devotees are pure devotees. But we need, as we learned from this chapter in Bhagavatam, there's different varieties of devotees, and we should associate with the highest devotee. Bhakti means pure bhakti. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and stop there. We're a little bit late. So today is Thursday, and so I'm going to come again and give class tomorrow. Generally, we haven't been giving class on Friday, but tomorrow I'll go ahead and give class again, and we'll continue the same chapter, just so let everybody know. Put it in your calendar, think about it. Saturdays, I'm here, but I won't be. From now on, we're going to start giving class every Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday, 3 days a week only. And we have a small group of devotees on Monday. If anybody here would like to take part in Zoom class, the same day, same times, but we're going to start broadcasting on Zoom also, which will enable devotees to make live comments. And I'll be able to see your face and tell if you're sleeping or not, and whatever like that. If anybody wants to take part in the Zoom discussion, just write a note either here or send me a private message. Sraddha Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Prem Anandi Hari Hari Bol, Vancha Kalpa Yudhishcha